The Great War, the war to end all wars, World War I. It's a conflict etched in our collective memory, a conflict that reshaped the world. But how did this global conflagration ignite? To understand, we must journey back to the decades preceding 1914, to a Europe simmering with tension. Picture this: empires vying for power, their ambitions fueled by fervent nationalism. Nationalism, that potent cocktail of pride and prejudice, whipped up populations into a frenzy. Add to this mix a dash of imperialism, the insatiable hunger for colonies and resources, and you have a recipe for disaster. Across Europe, nations forged alliances. These intricate webs of treaties meant to deter aggression, but like a house of cards, one wrong move could topple the lot. And then there was the arms race, a relentless build-up of weapons. Countries stockpiled rifles, artillery, and warships at an alarming rate, each side convinced that their arsenal guaranteed security. Into this powder keg of suspicion and paranoia stepped Gavrilo Princip, a young Serbian nationalist. On June 28, 1914, in the bustling streets of Sarajevo, Princip assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. This act, seemingly insignificant, would be the spark that lit the fuse. The assassination sent shockwaves across Europe. Austria-Hungary, blaming Serbia for the Archduke's death, issued an ultimatum, a list of demands so harsh that Serbia had little choice but to refuse. Diplomacy failed. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The intricate web of alliances meant to preserve peace now guaranteed war. Germany, bound by treaty to Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia, France's ally, and then on France itself. Germany's plan? Knock France out of the fight quickly before turning their full might on Russia. And so, on August 4, 1914, German troops marched into neutral Belgium, violating its sovereignty in a bid to outflank French defences. The German advance was swift and brutal. Belgian resistance, though fierce, was ultimately futile. Cities like Liège were bombarded, their medieval architecture reduced to rubble. The German army, a well-oiled machine, seemed unstoppable. But at the River Marne, just outside Paris, they met their match. The French, bolstered by British troops, rushed across the English Channel, dug in. The ensuing battle was a clash of titans, a bloody stalemate that lasted for days. Finally, exhausted and with their advance stalled, the Germans withdrew. The Schlieffen Plan, Germany's gamble for a swift victory, had failed. The war, they now realized, would be a long and bloody affair. On the Western Front, a 400-mile scar stretching from the Swiss Alps to the North Sea, a new form of warfare emerged: trench warfare. Imagine, if you will, a labyrinth of trenches, muddy, rat-infested ditches, crisscrossing the landscape. Here, millions of men would live, fight and die in conditions of unimaginable squalor. Life in the trenches was a living hell. Soldiers endured relentless shelling, the constant threat of snipers, and the ever-present stench of death. Rain transformed the trenches into quagmires, breeding grounds for disease. Trenchfoot, a painful and debilitating condition caused by prolonged exposure to damp and cold, was rampant. New technologies only added to the horror. Machine guns, capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, mowed down men in an instant. Artillery barrages pulverized entire sections of the battlefield, leaving behind craters filled with corpses. And then there was poison gas, a new and terrifying weapon that choked its victims, inflicting agonizing burns and blisters. Battles in this new type of war were horrific affairs. Massive offensives, often preceded by days of artillery bombardment, aimed to break through enemy lines. Yet, more often than not, these offensives achieved little but catastrophic casualties. The Battle of the Somme, a prime example of this futility, saw over 1 million casualties for just a few miles of gained ground. While the Western Front was locked in a stalemate, the Eastern Front raged with a ferocity all its own. Here, millions of Russians clashed with the armies of Germany and Austria-Hungary across a vast and unforgiving landscape. The scale of the fighting dwarfed anything seen in the West. The Russian army, though vast, was poorly equipped and led. They fought with courage and tenacity, but were hampered by shortages of everything from rifles to artillery shells. German military leadership, on the other hand, was generally superior, and they inflicted a series of crushing defeats on the Russians. One such defeat came at Tannenberg in August 1914, where German forces encircled and destroyed a Russian army twice their size. The Battle of the Masurian Lakes, a month later, resulted in another humiliating Russian defeat. Yet, despite these setbacks, the Russians continued to fight, their sheer numbers tying down vast numbers of German and Austro-Hungarian troops. The war had a devastating impact on Russia. The economy crumbled under the strain, and food shortages led to widespread discontent. The Tsar, increasingly isolated and blamed for the war's disasters, lost the support of his people. Revolution, brewing for years, was now inevitable.